watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN, and now TSPN presents Love, Hope, and Faith with Heather Murdock.
Welcome to Love, Hope, and Faith. My name is Heather Murdock, and happy Wednesday morning to you. What a beautiful day it is. I love the rain, and we sure need it, so thank you, Jesus, for that. And I am just delighted every Wednesday to be here with you and to bring you wonderful stories of hope and of purpose, and today is certainly no exception. I'm just going to get right to the program today. I am just so honored to have on my couch, on the set of Love, Hope, and Faith, I have the Honorable Judge-elect Steve Hermanson.
Good morning.
Hi, Steve. How do you like that kind of introduction? Isn't it exciting? It's
exciting.
I love it. It has a nice ring to it.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, and we were so privileged, my husband and I don't know if all the viewers may know, but we were able to be a part of your election committee, and that was such an honor to watch the process and how you won, and you won by like 2/3 of the population of Amador County, right?
It was a nice margin.
Yeah, it was very nice, and you're humble. That's good. It's so good. And I've been wanting to have you on my show for quite a while. In fact, I wanted to have you on during the elections, but we wanted to respect all the fairness there. But I'm really glad to have you on now because you have a really wonderful story, and a lot of people know your story, but I wanted to give more people the chance to hear. You know, I mean, your whole life story is very fascinating to me, but in particular, I want to start out with you had an accident at a young age, but I kind of wanted to take you back to your childhood and have you tell the story.
Okay. You know, I was raised in a strong Christian family. My father was a police officer. My mother was an elementary school teacher. My grandfather was a judge in the old constable courts and a hog rancher. And you know, I used to always joke when I was a kid that I had to obey the laws. I had to get good grades and I had to go to church. And that's pretty much the way I was raised. Mm-hmm. I had an older sister who was about 2.5 to 3 years older than me. And my life really started to change when I was 12, and she got diagnosed as having leukemia. And that really changed for those people who have lived with an individual in their house that has cancer, and especially a young teenager at that point. That really changed the focus and direction of our household. Yes. And when I was 14, she went out of remission, and it got very critical. And we went to City of Hope, and she was tested for a bone marrow transplant. And at that time, the doctors, that was early 1979, and the doctors told us that there was about a 1 in a million chance that I would be a donor for her. And you know, we had a lot of faith at that time because my sister's goal was to graduate from high school, and we matched. Wow. As a blood donor. So we did one of the original bone marrow transplants down in the City of Hope. And it was during that time that I really began to see my family's faith. I saw my sister who had an incredible belief in God, and watching what she went through as a 17-year-old, that the pain, the losing of her hair, the staying in the hospital for months at a time, and never complaining and being optimistic and looking for a purpose. And it was during that time that I had 3 great loves in life at that time. I loved motorcycles, I loved baseball, I loved football. Thought I was going to be a professional baseball player, and that changed. And I went out riding motorcycles on a Sunday afternoon, and during that time we had a pretty catastrophic head-on collision off a jump, and at 15 years old, basically, I lost the use of my left side and became paralyzed. And that was during the time that my sister had just got out of City of Hope.
What must your parents have been going through at that point? To have their daughter struggling with cancer, and now their son to be in this horrible accident?
I don't think I truly understood that until I became a parent. And when you look at your children and you have that desire to protect and to not have them suffer. But at that time, I mean, they kept a great attitude, and they also were very positive for both me and my sister. But they also didn't let us use excuses. You know, that was, and it was a time in my life where I remember looking at my sister who was trying to live, and I was trying to walk. And even at a young age, I was able to distinguish the differences in what people have to deal with. And I really understood at that time that everybody bears a cross. Everybody has a burden. Some people you can see. I mean, I now have a paralyzed left arm, and people can see that. Some people you can't. I don't know if the person I'm talking to has cancer and is dying. I don't know if they have some other type of disease. I don't know if they have emotional issues. I don't know what they have. And so I resolved early on in life that I would not ever use mine as an excuse just because it could be seen, and that I would accept that everybody's gone through things that makes them stronger, makes them part of who they are.
Did you have a moment, though, of self-pity?
You know, I remember waking up in the hospital, and it really goes back to prior to getting injured, and I would caution people, never make deals with God.
Yeah.
And I used to do this little run that ended up on the top of this hill, and I remember praying vigorously for my sister. You know, every morning I'd do this run, and I remember just saying to God, God, take anything I have. You can take football, you can take baseball, you can take anything I have. Let her graduate.
Wow.
And I remember waking up in the hospital and having an absolute peace. I knew that it was going to be okay.
Wow.
And there's been times, obviously, where you get frustrated. You learn to tie shoes again, and you learn to do simple tasks that you take for granted. You learn to walk again, things that you're having to learn to do twice. But there was always a sense of calm and a sense of peace.
Well, it reminds me of the scripture I love, that the peace of God that transcends all understanding. Because you really can't put a human level of understanding on that. It had to be the peace of God.
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely believe that.
Did you ever have a moment, though, where you said, God, why me? I mean, or was it, did you have that, did you have a realization or believe that because you had made that deal with God that this is kind of was the plan?
I've never said why me, and I don't know why. I've just always, and I think a lot of it has to do with God's intervention. I think a lot of it has to do with my sister, watching her go through that last year and ultimately die. Where when you're with someone who is in a lot worse situation than you, and their end result is a lot different than your end result.
Right, absolutely.
It changes
things in
your
perspective.
It definitely changes your perspective and takes you out of that why me.
I mean, you know, I hate to say this, but I know that you'll relate. And you know, I've had tragedy in my own life. My sister was killed by a drunk driver when she was 19, and other things. And as I look back, I can see how God has used those things for good. And as you're telling this story, I can see that it's like God allowed your sister to pass away, and he allowed this accident to happen, but he used it for good in so many ways in your life.
Sure.
And starting just in that point where he allowed you to have that perspective.
Sure.
Because you could have, maybe if your sister hadn't been struggling like that, you wouldn't have been able to have that perspective.
Possibly.
You know?
You know, and you look at the impact someone can have. I mean, it's 32 years since my sister died. And yet she still impacts my life, even now, in my profession, in my private life. And people come into your life and can impact them long after they're gone. And yes, I mean, God can use even a girl who lived to be 18 years old for a long time in life.
I think that God. I think you've been able to use this accident. You're being paralyzed on that side for good. I think has it driven you?
I have been. I was always driven, but I have been able to experience things that I don't think I would have experienced had I not been in an accident. You know, in the movie Soul Surfer, there's a great line at the end, and she's talking to people, and she says, they said, would you go back and change things? And I get asked that a lot. Would you go back? And if you could have a shot to play baseball again, have a shot to play football again, or race motorcycles, would you? And I'd say no. And people, I don't know if they believe you, but I really wouldn't. I mean, I've had the opportunity to race in the Ironman. I've had the opportunity to race for the United States national cycling team. I had the opportunity to study in Israel. I've been given a lot of opportunities in life that I may not have taken or tried had I not been injured. And through that, I've been able to, I think, make an impact on
touch more
people's lives.
people. Yes, yeah, and I can relate to that. I mean, on a different level, you know, people have asked me too, because I've shared my testimony so many times at this point through the show and other ways. People say, you know, would you go back and change it? You know, and I say no, because God's used it, and now I get to serve God through my past. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And that's what you're saying.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's a portion of who we are. It's what helps develop us.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, if you're proud and happy of who you are, not that we don't always strive to be better and to
or
do
make
good,
mistakes.
Or make mistakes. But if we're proud of who we are, then we accept our past and understand how that's utilized into who we are.
Yeah, exactly. And your sister, and I can imagine, thank God that your parents were believers and instilled that faith in you, because how could you have gone through all this without God? You know, it would have been such a different story.
Right. Oh, I believe that. I believe that. There was always an underlying message of hope and beyond that, faith in my family. My family always believed that everything would be okay. Yes. You know, and ultimately, if you tried hard and you kept your faith and you did your best, that would be success.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you what your definition of success is, but I think there it is.
Well, I think
Part
it changes.
Of it? Yeah, it changes, yeah.
I think it changes.
Yeah, good. Okay, well, there's so many more questions I want to ask you, and we have to take a break. Time goes by so quickly. We'll be back in about 3 minutes. Do come back for more with Steve Hermanson. Welcome back to Love, Hope, and Faith. And today I'm interviewing our local Amador County Judge-elect, Steve Hermanson, and you're sharing your story, powerful story, and you were sharing about how you just wanted your sister to be able to graduate high school, and you prayed about that. So was she able to?
She did. She graduated high school. She was an extremely intelligent person.
I imagine she was, yes.
She graduated high school, and that was a good time. She had to, she had to wear a mask and a wig at the graduation, but that was a big deal.
It must have been. I wish I could have been there to see her, but she must have been glowing and so happy to be able to fulfill that desire.
Yeah.
You know, it was awesome.
It was a good moment.
Yeah. Good for your parents, too.
Oh, very.
Yeah.
Very good.
And she passed away very shortly after that?
She passed away about a year after that.
Okay. Okay, good. I mean, not good. So I always ask people, you know, as a Christian family and you raise kids and you really want your kids to have their own relationship with Jesus, and so many people I've had on my show, from pastors to lay people, that have shared that they had a God moment, that God initially was their parents' God, but they had that God moment. So was this your God moment? Was God real to you before this happened?
You know, I think I understood and I began to see the concept of how God can work in people's lives after my sister got ill. But that was the moment that God truly became real to me. And it really started when I was praying for my sister to graduate. And, you know, I touched a little bit earlier when I was in the hospital that there was a calmness over me. I truly attribute that to God, that I understood that God was there, and that perhaps my life was going to take a different direction. I remember laying in the hospital bed, and this is for all those people out there that think people in hospital beds don't hear what you say. Yeah, okay. Take note. And the doctor's talking to my parents, and he's basically telling my parents that they didn't know if I would amount to much, the doctor, that they didn't know if I'd be able to do much again, but at least they had a son. And basically telling my parents just be happy that he's still breathing. And I could hear that. And you kind of, those things make impacts on you, because it's not people that decide what I can do, it's me that decides what I can do. And it's God ultimately that allows or doesn't allow me to do something, not a doctor telling me what I can and can't do.
Right, exactly. Well, so, okay, that's an interesting point. So some people, that can be a defining moment right there. Some people could take that in a negative way and become filled with self-pity and let that be like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and to an extent. And some people, like yourself, take it and say, no, I'm going to be something. What is it in us that causes that helps us to make that decision? We're going to either go this way or this way.
I'd like to say fortitude, if I were to put a word on it. But I've met a lot of people after I got hurt. You meet a lot of people who have been in catastrophic accidents and or had catastrophic things in life. And it seems like there's no middle ground. It seems like people either decide they're going to go for it and try and do anything they can in life, or they wallow in self-pity. You know, there's none of them that just kind of go through life.
Right.
They go
It's
extremes. It's one or the other. And, you know, at least in my life, I think it was a confidence that God was going to work it out. And it was also, I had a strong support system. I mean, my grandma would sit there every day with me and talk to me about, don't be afraid to fail.
Yeah,
don't be afraid to try and to fail. You know, turn your failures into inspiration. Don't wallow in them. And so I had a support system around me that would encourage me to try and not to be afraid if I didn't succeed.
Wow, that's amazing. So words of grandmas and grandpas can hold lots of value and weight in our lives. I know.
Absolutely.
I had grandparents too that were really there for me during struggles as a kid and who prayed for me faithfully every single day. And I attribute a lot of where I am today with the Lord to my grandma's prayers.
Oh,
you know,
absolutely.
To her belief in me. You
Yes.
know, so that's awesome. So I like to ask people because I think we can all relate, or we all want to hear, I should say. What was your mountaintop experience? What has been your mountaintop experience in life? I mean, this right here is, I mean, this could be it, but...
It's changed, and I tried to explain that with success. It kind of changes as you go along in life. I had a conversation with one of my best friends before we moved up here, and I was explaining to him, we're sitting down having a cup of coffee, and I said, Scott, I've been very lucky in life. I mean, I've been able to do and see things that a lot of people have not, and I'm very blessed that way, and I feel very lucky. You can take the Ironman, you can take racing in the Paralympics, World Championships, you can take traveling and studying abroad, and all that means nothing if at the end of my life my memory is of my children being born. My life was success. Because it was at that point when my children were born that I think I truly came closest to understanding what God's love is. Because here you are, you're sitting in this room, and this doctor hands you this little object that isn't responding to you, can't see you, can't interact with you, yet that the love and protection and desire you feel for that child to have them be successful in life, and you will do everything you can at that moment, and you're getting nothing in return. And it was, that's when I truly understood, or begin to at least understand, the true concept of what God's love is.
God the Father.
Yeah, exactly. And the memory of my children being born is far and above. I mean, the memory of getting married to my wife is
of course.
I
Yes.
mean, obviously,
you have a wonderful wife. Yes.
I would not want to diminish
the
that.
great woman behind the man.
Yeah.
Yes. Beside the man.
But I would have to say that it was having kids that I will always say was my peak in life for me.
I concur with that. And for me, I remember holding my daughter in the nursery, our first, my first child, and holding her and just looking at her and just, getting very emotional, and just, it was the first time that I felt like outside of myself, like something mattered more than anything than life. You know what I'm saying? That moment of just, it's such a physical and emotional and spiritual response. Right. So I totally relate to what you're saying.
Exactly.
Nothing matters more. So good. Okay. Well, then on the opposite end of the spectrum, what's been your valley experience?
My valley, believe it or not, was probably at a point before I was married, and I had become an attorney, and I was still racing bikes for the U.S. national team and traveling a lot. And from the outside world looking in, they would probably think that I had a good lifestyle. I had a good life. I had a good job. I traveled a lot. I could, do what I wanted when I wanted. But it was a very empty and hollow time in life, because it was, God, why am I going through life alone right now? And I didn't have anybody to share that with. And so there was really a time where I was lonely. And I felt that was kind of a probably the biggest valley in my life.
Yeah, I can understand that. So what did you, we kind of skipped over, but to go back a little bit again, after you had the accident and went through recovery and all that, when did you decide to go through the Olympics? I mean, I know they chose you for that, but when did you decide to use that and get involved in the sports side of that?
You know, I started out when I couldn't play baseball anymore, or at least I chose not to, and I changed directions, and I ended up playing tennis and being at least going to college to play tennis, and I started doing other things. I started surfing and learning to do things that I probably never would have done before and engaged in. And I remember sitting there with the individual who was in the crash with me, who had grown up with me, and we were watching the Ironman on TV, and it was from 1982, and it was Julie Moss. And Julie Moss she was winning the race, and she, as she's going to the finish line, she's probably 200 yards from the finish line, she falls over and collapses. And she starts crawling to the finish line, and everybody's sitting there yelling at her, and they can't help her, and she's crying, and they're panning on her face on Wide World of Sports.
Wow.
And her determination, I mean, you could just, her eyes, and she can barely move her arms and hold her weight up, and she's crawling on her hands and knees, and she gets past. And she never quits. She keeps crawling to that finish line, and I'm watching that, and I'm going, I understand that feeling. I mean, I understand that desire to accomplish, and even though you want to quit, and it might be easier at that point to go and to finish it. And I watched that, and I decided that was something I wanted to try. And so I just started running, and my friend who ended up being an engineer helped me adapt a bike, and started riding with him, and then I got that opportunity in 1992 to run in Hawaii, and I did very well in that triathlon, and I got invited back to the Olympic Training Center to try out for the United States cycling team, and I went back there and tried out and ended up racing for them for probably 5 or 6 years.
Oh, wow. Wow. Do you think that was spurred by a desire to prove to yourself that you could still do things like that? Because you must have been a very physical person prior to the accident. You were involved in sports and motorcycle riding and all that. So do you think you had an attitude or I want to prove it to myself, or maybe prove it to others? Do you think that was part of it?
I don't think I could say there isn't some of that that goes on, obviously. But I was competitive. To begin with, yeah. And I remember doing an interview after the Paralympics, and they were asking me, and I was racing bikes, and I told people I don't want to be considered a really good disabled athlete. I want to be considered an athlete.
Yes.
I don't care who you are next to me. I mean, I want to win. I mean, that was the competitive
That's how you're
part.
wired.
So,
yeah.
It's probably a combination of them. I think that when you're going after an athletic achievement, after learning to do simple things like walking and that again, it puts it in perspective, and the suffering's not as not as great.
Absolutely.
So it makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sure there were times along the way, because you're human, even though you seem superhuman sometimes, but you're human, and I'm sure there was times along the way where you wanted to quit, but you didn't. And I think that's the difference, right, in life. It's like we all get to those moments that we want to quit, but the difference maker is not quitting when you want to quit.
Exactly. That's fortitude.
Yeah, that's fortitude. Exactly. Good. Okay. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN.
Welcome back to Love, Hope, and Faith, and I'm really enjoying this interview, Steve. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
A lot of great stuff here. I was sharing with you a little bit off camera. About a month ago, the kids and I were in a grocery store, and there was a gentleman who was in a wheelchair. And we were, he was in the same area with the vegetables that I was in, and he accidentally bumped into the tomato stand, and all the tomatoes, well, not all of them, but several tomatoes came tumbling onto the floor. And my instant reaction was to get down and start helping him. It was just an instant, like I said, reaction. It wasn't until I started bend down that I realized, oh, he's in a wheelchair, and because I just saw these tomatoes crash down. And his response to me was kind of shocking. He said, I don't want your help. I don't need your help. And he yelled it. yelled at me, and I said, oh, I'm sorry, and I quickly got up and stopped helping, and there he was picking everything up, struggling to pick everything up, and it was a shocking thing because I didn't know how to respond, and I didn't want to hurt his feelings. I didn't mean it that way. I would have helped him anyway,
Right.
So what's your take on that?
My response to him would have been, I would help you if you were in a wheelchair or not in a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to help someone, you help them because they need help.
Yeah.
Not help them because of who they are or a physical characteristic.
Yeah.
If you're going to open the door for someone, you open the door for everybody.
Right, exactly.
And so I would have told him, that's the greatest compliment I can give you,
mm-hmm.
is to treat you equally.
Yeah, I know. That's good.
So
but I think that we meaning people that don't have some sort of a physical handicap, because I think we're all handicapped in some way, right? Is handicap the right word to use? I don't know if that's
I don't
the right
get caught
word.
up on phrases.
Okay, good. Anyway, some sort of physical challenge, we'll say. Sometimes you don't know how to act. Did you ever feel like, were you ever embarrassed to receive help?
Sure.
In your journey?
Sure. And, some of it is when you realize that you're not doing something, or you did something because of your disability,
mm-hmm.
and you don't want to draw attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
People have, like kids are wonderful because they'll stare at you and they'll ask you point blank what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Adults are a little more subversive about how they do it.
Yeah.
And they'll watch. So there are times that you feel embarrassed. There are times that you feel very aware of it. But some of the greatest compliments I have, even like during the campaign, I always wear a jacket when I'm in court or when I'm not, and when I'm not, I wear a brace. And I've ran into people, and they say, "When did you hurt your arm?" And I've talked to them for a long time,
mm-hmm.
and that's good because they're not focused on my arm; they're focused on me and who I am.
That happened to me and you. I don't know if you know this, but I'll tell you now. I remember I had met you just a couple times. My husband knew you better than knew you with more familiarity than I did, and so I never noticed anything. I just met you a couple times and just chit chat, whatever. And then the first time we went to your house, and you were, I think, helping your wife pass out some beverages and things, and I noticed that you had that. Your
right.
Is it your brace or what do you call that?
Yes, that's a brace.
And I remember saying to you, "Oh, when did you hurt your arm?" I don't know if you remember that, but I felt so stupid. Later, Vince goes, "Heather, why'd you ask him that?" And I said, "I don't know." I just didn't notice it before.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing, I guess,
Yeah,
because I didn't notice it about you at first.
That's fine.
Yeah. So I'm sure that happens to you quite a bit.
It does.
Yeah, that's good. Because I remember your response was, "Oh yeah." You said, "I said, how'd you hurt your arm?" You go, "Oh, motorcycle accident." And I thought you meant recently,
right?
And I go, "A bad one." You go, "Oh yeah," but you were just very lighthearted about it.
Oh, it's kind of a joke with my wife. Every time we go through a drive-through, McDonald's or a Burger King out of town or somewhere, 90% of the time they'll ask me what happened to me,
mm-hmm.
and then they'll relate a story that, well, I had to wear a brace. I separated my shoulder,
mm-hmm.
10 years ago for a week, and it's always interesting.
Yeah, good. Well, so when did you decide you wanted to be an attorney or prosecutor, I should say? Because kind of fast forwarding to now, you have been a prosecutor for how many years?
5.5 years.
Okay.
Been an attorney for 20.
Okay.
When I first got out of college, I started out and I was an investigator for child abuse and elder abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fairly young. I was 21 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And as I went through that process, I became kind of frustrated because I kind of felt like I was a Band-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
I would go into a situation, I would try and resolve the situation, and then I never knew what happened.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any idea of what would occur after that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to my dad and about what might be a logical progression from that. And then I had a strange conversation with one of my friends from college who I just talked to out of the blue after a couple of years, and she told me that she was going to law school. And her response to me, I said, "Well, I'm not sure what I want to do. I'm not sure if I want to, get my master's in social work or go along those lines." And she looked at me and she said, "Steve, no knowledge is ever wasted." And I sat there and I went, "You're right. If I go to law school and I decide I want to pursue the other, I haven't wasted anything."
Mm-hmm.
And doors started opening. You know, I've said sometimes that God always gives us directions, but sometimes, you know, there's a little white arrow over on the road that points somewhere, and sometimes he hits you with a 2x4, and it's very apparent which way you should go. Doors started opening for me when I went to law school, and I was presented with some opportunities to still be in that field of protecting individuals' rights while still working as an attorney and finishing law school. It was a good fit, and it allowed me to really take the next step that I wanted to take to help people. So
the underlying motivator was a desire to help people. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
And there's so many different areas you could have done that in. It's interesting the one you chose. Do you feel like you're called? You know, do you feel called meaning, you know, by God?
I think we're all called by God. I think that, you know, I was raised in a manner that we owe a duty or an obligation to society. My father was a police officer. My mother was a teacher. You know, it was very ingrained in me that you did things because you could benefit others.
Your community.
You could benefit your community. That's why you did a job. And if your personality was such that you could do specific type of work, emergency response on child protective services or elder abuse, and being able to see
you've seen the worst side of people.
Yes.
How has that changed you?
It makes you a little more cynical in life. There are times where I really have to work hard at not being cynical in every situation. Yeah. You know, I can walk in a restaurant and my instinct is to sit there and try and decide who's telling the truth, who isn't telling the truth, who's, you know, who might be planning something, who's engaging in some type of behavior that's wrong. And I really have to work hard. And my wife's wonderful at
good.
helping me with that, and my kids. Everything in balance. And it takes work. I think it takes a lot of work. And it would be easy to, if all you deal with is people who are in trouble, to believe that that's the way of the world. But then I meet good people, even from prosecuting standpoint. I've met defendants who are good people who made a bad choice. And that reinstills in me that optimism.
Do you feel like your faith has also helped you in that way too?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. You know, there are times where what you see you don't understand. And some very catastrophic things that you have to observe and see and live through with people.
Do you ever question God, why? God, why do you allow these terrible things to happen? I look at it a different way. I always say, God, what can I do to help this situation? What can I do to make it better? What can I do to let people see you come through me in this situation? I think I've always accepted that bad things occur in the world, that whether it is an accident or whether it is evil out there or somebody that does something that is wrong. There's bad things that happen. I don't think that is that can be an opportunity for good,
for us to rise.
Yes. My daughter yesterday said to me, Mom, you know, I can't wait till my faith is like your faith. And my daughter is really starting to blossom in her own faith. It's so awesome to watch. And she said, I can't wait till I'm to the point where when something bad happens, I still trust God. Yes. And I told her, and it kind of reminded me of what you're saying, His ways are not our ways. Exactly. His thoughts are not our thoughts. His ways are higher than our ways.
Exactly.
And so you have to keep that in mind and really believe that.
Exactly. And you have to keep an open mind. And really look at how God can use you in different situations. 10 years ago, I never would have thought I'd be sitting on a couch in Amador County.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Because you lived in Southern California.
I did.
Yeah.
I lived in Southern California.
Is that where you met your wife?
I did. I met my wife in Southern California.
And how old were you when you guys got married? Or when you met?
Thanks. there might be a dispute here between me and my wife of how old we were, but that's okay.
You're in your 20s, early 20s?
I was in my early 30s.
Oh, early 30s. Okay. Okay, good.
I got married at 36 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I got married later in life.
So you had, because you shared with us that you had that lonely period.
Right.
So that kind of lasted a while.
It did.
Yeah.
I think, it lasted when you get in your late 20s and you're kind of naturally progressing in life and you're looking for ways to fulfill your life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And, you can only shove so much stuff in that God-spaced void inside of you.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you have to sit back and say, okay, God, what's the plan in my life? What can I do to be fulfilled in my life?
Yeah. And then along came Christina. That's awesome. And the beautiful kids you have. Good. Okay, well, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back in about 3 minutes. Do stay tuned.
Have you performed new construction, or has your assessment...
That I was reminded, welcome back, I was reminded of the scripture somewhere in Matthew that says, if anyone would come after me, they must pick up their cross and follow me. And I feel like you've picked up your cross with dignity and with purpose.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's heavy, and sometimes it feels fairly light.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all have our cross to bear, like you said.
Absolutely.
Some are visible and some are not. So, absolutely. So now you, this, as many people here know, all people should know in Amador County at least, that you are the judge-elect. And what was that process like for you? How did that affect your family, the whole election process?
It was very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a fun process.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you have to subject yourself to what you know is not going to be fun to achieve a goal.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believed that I could benefit Amador County at that time, so I was willing to do it. But it was a joint effort between me and my wife.
Yes.
I would not have done that without her.
She was amazing.
Without her being on board with that.
Mm-hmm.
Because your family lives it with you.
Yes.
They hear everything that goes on.
All the criticisms,
Sure.
the speculation,
Sure.
the rumors.
Sure.
I mean, you guys weathered a lot.
Yeah, family hears everything. And so you try and shelter your kids. You try and keep it from impacting them as best you can. And it was a lot of time away, which was hard. I mean, we moved here so that we could spend more time with our family and really do. So it was hard for that final 6-7 months when it's getting real intense and you're having to be gone 3 or 4 nights a week to different events and talking to people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would imagine, though, that there was some great teaching moments along the way for your sons, that you could teach them about life and people and faith. And
there were great teaching moments for my sons, and there was great teaching moments for me that I would understand and learn things.
Can you share one with us? What's one thing you learned that you could share with us today that maybe you haven't? That's not the obvious.
That's not the obvious?
Yeah, the obvious would be, stick it out and persevere and integrity and all those things. But is there anything else that you learned that surprised you?
I went door to door. I hit, I think, 1,500 houses where I went, and I went door to door and talked to people. And out of that 1,500 experiences, there were only 1 or 2 that were really bad, where the people would yell at you or say things to you. So I was surprised at, even in a contested election, where that the people you're talking to may not be for you, that they were still kind, they were still treated me in a dignified manner.
Right.
So it kind of shocked me a little bit. It brought me back to reality and reaffirmed that I always need to treat people that way as well.
Yeah, if I may add, I was sharing with you before the show started, and I was kind of teasing you because I said not that you're Jesus. However, as Christians, we hope that we have the likeness of Jesus within us. That's what we want. And one of the things that I love about Jesus is that he convicts without condemning.
Sure.
And I see that in you. I see that quality. I think a lot of people do, that you're able to be in a role that you're, whether it's a prosecutor or even in the future when you take up the judge position, that you will be able to, or have been able to, convict without condemning.
Sure.
You know?
It's ultimately, it's still people that are involved in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's not theory, it's not ideology.
Yeah.
It is people
Mm-hmm.
who have real lives, who have real feelings and things that have happened. And it is treating them as such,
Mm-hmm.
Treating all people in a humane and dignified manner.
Mm-hmm.
I think that has been what I've attempted to live by the vast majority of my adult life.
Right.
And it's a mantra that I will continue to live by and strive every day, that if you're in front of me, or if in the next month if I'm prosecuting you, I will always treat you with respect and dignity,
Mm-hmm.
and not demean you in any manner. And it takes effort at times.
Yes.
It's
Oh,
easy
wow.
to want to
Yes.
get in, as an attorney, sometimes it's easy to want to get in and fight and
Especially when you see, kids abused, sexual abuse, physical abuse, innocent victims.
yes,
I don't know how you do it.
that's hard at times.
Mm-hmm.
That's very hard at times.
Mm-hmm.
And kids are vulnerable people. It's very difficult when people take advantage of them.
Mm-hmm. I don't know, yeah. By the grace of God, like you said, How do you think your role as a prosecutor will help you as your role as judge?
Well, and I really need to expand on that, because although I've been a prosecutor for 5.5 years, I've been an attorney for 20.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a lot of different type of experiences.
Mm-hmm.
They all will impact me as a judge,
Mm-hmm.
because they all bring different qualities to the table.
Right. You're kind of well-rounded in that respect.
Prosecution is upholding the law, and I think that the one thing that the true duty of a prosecutor should be is blind when they prosecute.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not advocating on behalf of a particular person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're advocating on behalf of society as a whole. And that is similar
Mm-hmm.
to what a judge should do. A judge should always be blind as to who the parties are.
Yes.
One of the biggest things that a judge can do is to ensure that the law never becomes a popularity contest.
Yes. Amen.
That if you are in front of a judge, you feel as confident in front of that judge as someone else.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter your race, your gender, your religious beliefs. It doesn't matter about any of that. It doesn't matter what city you're from.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter your name. You have to look at each case, and you have to treat that case in an absolutely unbiased manner.
Yeah.
And I take that very seriously. I think that is the number one priority of a judicial officer as well as a prosecutor.
Do you think that ability is innate within you, or do you think that's a learned quality to be able to do that?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
You have it, so whether it's been learned or developed
I don't know.
But I think that certain characteristics are given, we have certain personality traits and characteristics that make
Sure.
certain jobs easier. I think we kind of talked about that a little bit.
Right.
And you seem to have those. So, you're equipped.
I'm equipped.
Mhm.
God equipped me to
Yeah.
handle a certain type of work.
Yeah, exactly. What are you excited about being a judge? I know you said you are excited. So what are you excited about the most, do you think?
Well, it'll be nice to be the referee as opposed to the individual that the bell gets rung
Yeah.
and you come out and start going at it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to get into a lot of different areas of the law again.
Mhm.
And not all areas of the law are like criminal law. There are other areas that are as interesting, and from a legal perspective, great.
Mhm.
And so I'm interested and excited to get back into those areas to deal in civil and family law and probate and juvenile, and see a lot of different aspects and come in contact with a lot more people
Mhm.
in our community, as opposed to just seeing them in a defendant role
Yeah.
or a victim
Mhm.
role.
Yeah. Yeah, you have a lot more resources and leeway at your disposal
Yes.
to be more creative, I guess, in a way, huh?
I think so.
Mhm.
I think that I see it as an expansion of the ability to work in the community. Instead of being narrow in the prosecution realm,
Mhm.
I can expand it and help the community in a lot of different ways. And so I'm excited about that.
Good. And one of the things I loved about what you said on the campaign trail was it campaign trail? I guess it is, kind of in a way. Yeah. Was that you expressed a desire to really, you said that in order for a judge or a community to thrive, it takes a village. I don't know if those were your exact words, but it takes the churches and the different organizations
Absolutely.
and the people to be kind of one around issues.
Right.
And I like that you said that.
Well, the benefit of a small town, the benefit of a small county, is that it doesn't have the anonymity of a city. That you can't hide your problems as easy. And so it's the responsibility of everybody. We don't have the luxury in these economic times of having money thrown at a problem or having the state step in and try to fix problems. We're going to have to fix problems as a community. And some of that will be volunteer work. And it means that your whole community has to be involved.
Yeah.
It can't be only funded programs through the county or state. It has to be all people within the community.
Yeah, exactly. And not having money is a problem for sure, and all the cutbacks and different things, but not having the money can be a benefit too, based on what you're saying here, that it causes people to empowers people
Sure.
to be able to step up and be more creative, volunteer, get more involved,
and
be
that,
part of the solution.
Exactly. And that goes to keeping your community safe.
Yeah.
Don't accept things that happen in your community as well. It's just happening. You can make a difference. You can change things.
Yeah, and you're such a great example of that just through your life.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it made a difference. And I'm sure when you were doing your the Special Olympics and all those things you were involved in, I'm sure that you touched lives, and through people seeing that nothing kept you down. And that's a great life lesson for all of us.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So, is there any last thing you'd like to say? I think we have a couple of minutes left. About a minute. Anything you'd like to touch on in closing?
Not really.
No? Good. You've been a great guest today.
I've touched on my whole life.
Yeah, I know, that's enough. I know the scrutiny.
I don't need to expand much further. So.
Good. Well, I really want to thank you again. It's been a real pleasure to have you on today.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for being so transparent. You don't know if a judge is able to be transparent, but you've been able to do that with dignity and class. So
well, you should know who people are. I said this on the campaign trail, and I'll say this again, is who we are in our personal life is as important as who we are in our professional life.
Absolutely.
And if you are going to be in front of me, you should at least know who I am.
Yeah.
And I don't have a problem with that.
Good. Excellent.
So
Good. Okay.
It's good to come on shows and let people know. And I appreciate you for having me. And it's a good service.
Good. Excellent. Good. And I'd like to remind you, if you want to check out the show and you're not able to view cable, you can go to YouTube. TSPN TV has all their shows loaded onto YouTube now, so you can go to Love, Hope, and Faith with Heather Murdock. And do come back next week. Have a great show lined up for you. Have a blessed week, and I'll see you soon.